Welcome back. NEC member and Social Development Minister Lindiwe Zulu says the ANC doesn't support the idea of coalitions. In an interview with the public broadcaster, the minister accused the media of putting much focus on coalition governments. The South African media at large notes multiple surveys from polling agencies which point to President Cyril Ramaphosa and the governing ANC declining ratings for their electorate. Now, Minister Zulu joins us now for more on her ideas and how her party views coalitions. Minister Zulu, thank you so much for joining us on Newzroom Afrika tonight. Now, you're saying as the ANC you aren't too happy about coalitions and that in fact, they're not working. But we do know that the ANC has been on a consistent decline in the national elections since about 2004. Why are you blaming the media for the coalition's talk and not South Africans for what they want to vote for?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, but let me first start from here that I think the language that sometimes we use, like blaming the media, like the article that came afterwards when I was speaking, it's the language that sometimes I just have issues with. Let me start from there. Because when I called, I was calling on the basis of the debate and the debate that was also followed by some callers. And I responded to one of the callers who said that he did not believe in coalitions because coalitions were not working and coalitions were very difficult to manage also from a South African context point of view. Very difficult to manage from a point of view. Let's start, where did coalition start? It was after the elections, the local government elections, that due to the results that were coming out, then we were almost like forced into situations of going into coalitions because you have to govern. And if you have to govern and you don't get, let's say, the two-thirds majority or you don't get the majority, then you end up being forced by your circumstances to go into coalitions. My issue that I picked up was a consistent narrative that seems to be a narrative that is driving South Africa towards coalitions, a narrative that seems to be saying, irrespective of what we see, what coalitions have produced and how coalitions are not working in the South African context. It's almost like whether we see that it's not working or not, we are driving towards a coalition. What also I was disturbed about, and I still get disturbed about it, but of course, this is democracy. You have institutions that will go and do research and come out and they say, well, President Cyril Ramaphosa was at 40-something%, and now he is at 40 whatever percent. And the narrative keeps insisting, even when people can see for themselves, that when the president goes to places and speaks to people, and speaks to the people of South Africa, and speaks to the people who are concerned about their day-to-day lives, people who are concerned even about challenges that have been faced by the African National Congress. But then there's this insistence that, we are planning for coalitions, we're going to go into coalitions. Fact of the matter is that, yes, there's freedom of expression, freedom of the press, and freedom of everything in South Africa, which, by the way, we fought for them. That's why we have it in the Constitution. But you cannot run away from fact that the media in general has got a greater power of the airwaves, greater power of writing, greater power, and therefore, in the South African context, you will not deny the fact that the media does have a very huge influence. And so when they pick up on topics and they keep on repeating and repeating it, it ends up being something like, in South Africa we're going to coalitions. Here is fact. We as the African National Congress have said we are going into these elections to win the elections. The fact that we had discussions about coalitions is necessary for us to have had those discussions about coalitions, especially after the results of the last local government elections. And therefore, we always need to prepare for ourselves for this result or that result, but with one resolve, that we are going to go out and campaign not on the basis of planning for any coalitions, but on the basis that we are going to win the elections.
Minister, you speak of the media's influence, and I think no one can disagree with you that the media does have a lot of influence, but the media also reports on facts, on what is actually happening on the ground. And the fact remains, if we look at elections results from 2004 up until 2019, it's the voters who are saying that they don't want you to have a two-thirds majority. It's the voters who are showing their disgruntlement by voting for other parties, which is creating coalition governments. And it's the voters who are showing their disgruntlement with your governing party by not going to vote either. So instead of looking at the talk of coalitions, which is a reality as we've seen at local government level, why doesn't the ANC introspect to say, why aren't people voting for us anymore? What is making us so unattractive? And I mean, I think the answers are quite obvious there.
You are using a language that also says, why are we so unattractive to people? And yet the facts speak for themselves. Look at the results even now, because we're talking about results. Look at the results of most of the elections that have been happening, crisscrossing the country. Look at the by-elections that have been held recently, and look at the results of those by-elections. What my issue remains, it still remains, it's the language that we keep on using. It's the language that makes us in the African National Congress get a sense that irrespective of what the voters might want, there are people who actually want to see coalition. Because, facts, I agree with you, there are people who are unhappy with the African National Congress. There are reasons why they are unhappy with the African National Congress. And the African National Congress has been the one that has accepted that in many instances, and in some instances in different places, it has not done right by the people of South Africa. And that is the reason why the African National Congress embarked on renewing itself. That's why the African National Congress has put the issue of corruption at the center of its discussion, at the center of saying, where we need to do the change, we must do the change. We have clearly said so, and President Cyril Ramaphosa has clearly said so in no uncertain terms. My issue is when the insistence of coalitions becomes a discussion that is that you yourself are saying the voters are rejecting us. I mean, go back to the elections of not only just the local government elections, just go to the national elections itself and see the results.
I actually want us to do that, Minister. Let's instead of sorry to cut you off there, let's actually look at those numbers, because there is no sentimentality or being able to be subjective about it. The numbers don't lie. The highest that you ever achieved as the ANC was in 2004, just under 70%. You haven't come anywhere near that. Since 2004, it is not the media's narrative, it is the voters of this country who have not been voting in the numbers that they have for the African National Congress. You went from just under 70% to 2019, where you got 57.5%. Now, if the numbers are anything to go by, there is a steady decline. So my question is, why does the ANC not introspect and say, as opposed to, why are we talking about coalitions? What are we going to do to go back to our former glory days? Now, to say you are anti-corruption and to say that, what the president has called that corruption needs to be put to an end, and we've heard this time and time again from the ANC, but seeing it is another thing.
Introspection is not something that has been imposed on us. Introspection is what we ourselves, as the African National Congress, go to the last conference that we had, go to any other conferences and the meetings, go to the speeches of the president himself after every time we have the National Executive Committee. Go to the fact that we ourselves as the ANC, we've got our own internal research that gives us the facts that you are giving us. Introspection is what we believe in. It is for this reason that we speak about the renewal of the African National Congress. We speak about the new ways of doing things. We speak about responding to the people of South Africa in a different way and responding to the concerns that South Africans are raising. That the figures speak for themselves, I cannot deny that. The figures speak for themselves, but it is this very same African National Congress that has identified the reason why some of our people stayed away and did not even go to vote. They did not even go to vote for anybody else. Many of them stayed home and they were saying to the ANC, we want to teach you a lesson. We want you to appreciate us. We want you to understand us. We want you to listen to us. And you will see for yourselves when the manifesto of the African National Congress is presented by the ANC in eThekwini, that is where you will see the difference between what we did in the past and where we're going to be focused on. And yes, we are concerned about the decline in the numbers. And yes, it is for this reason that we decided we must embark on a renewal of the African National Congress. We must embark on ensuring that we respond to the needs of our people by doing right by the people of South Africa.
And Minister, while you are embarking on that project, what South Africans are faced with is load shedding, chronic corruption, rampant crime, high levels of unemployment, poor housing, water shortages. I could go on and on and on with the list of problems that we face in South Africa. Wouldn't you say that these problems were also created by your party as well? And had your party governed well enough, we wouldn't find ourselves in a position where we're talking about coalitions in the first place.
Easier said than it is done. It is a fact that if we look at the 30 years of the government and governance of the African National Congress, you can talk about a whole lot of other things that this government has changed. This government is the one that came with a constitution. Of course, that constitution was something that was drawn by a number of South Africans, even those outside of the African National Congress. This government is the government that brought together 9 different countries, and I don't know how many other government institutions that were over. This is the government that made sure that South Africa is one. This is the government that made sure that there is one government, national, provincial, and local. This is the government that has changed the lives of our people. If you look at the numbers, we can crunch the numbers in as far as health is concerned, in as far as education is concerned, in as far as the overall improvement of the lives of ordinary, underprivileged South Africans. This is the government that has stabilized and kept peace, security, and stability. In fact, it is this government that has made the difference between what was and what we have now in the 30 years. Granted, there's been mistakes. Granted, there's been corruption. Granted, there's been underdevelopment. But if you look at what we have done in the past 30 years and what South Africa was pre the 30 years and what South Africa is today, there is a huge difference.
Your very own former president of the ANC, Jacob Zuma, is campaigning against the ANC as well. Now, we are rightfully pointing out historical achievements of the African National Congress, but the lived experience of citizens today, when we talk about the ANC, is far a different cry from the achievements that you're noting as well. Wouldn't you say that rather than focusing on these achievements, rather than that, look at these own goals that you have scored time and time again as the ANC?
Yes, look, there is absolutely no way that we can be looking at achievements without recognizing what did we inherit. There's no way that we can look at the achievements without understanding and appreciating the historical challenges and the infrastructure that we are talking about, the growth and the non-growth, the economy, the benefits that people have achieved since then. Yes, we have accepted the fact that we've had our own goals. We are not an organization that ran away from those truths, that ran away from those facts. Even the fact that amongst our own, you would have those that have decided that they will go and form their own political parties. They go and form their political parties because they have the freedom in South Africa to do that. But we will tell you, as members of the African National Congress, and long-standing members of the African National Congress is that when the ANC is confronted with any form of challenge, we confront those challenges and commit ourselves to making the change that needs to be done. Even now, at this hour, as we prepare for the 2024 elections, we are going into those elections with one thing and one thing in our mind. We are going to win those elections. We'll mobilize our people. We will convince our people that we accept the problems that have happened. We accept the weaknesses that have happened, but we are going to go back to the people of South Africa and say, if you weigh the good things that have been done, not only by the government of the African National Congress, because, by the way, we don't do what we do single-handedly as the African National Congress. We are supported by a number of other organizations, supported by a whole lot of communities in order for us to be able to deliver on what we promise to the people of South Africa. So we're going into these elections to win the elections. We are not going to be campaigning for going into coalitions with anybody. We want to win the elections. And that's what we'll be selling when the president presents the manifesto of the African National Congress. You will see even for yourself the difference from previous manifestos, the focus of what is now going to be going forward, and lessons that we have learned from the past, including the ones that we are raising with me right now, that is what has irritated many of the South African people. But at the same time, those that have been irritated with us, rightfully because we've made the mistakes, we are saying to them, give us the chance. We have experience. We know what went wrong. We are now prepared to correct. But also don't lose sight of where did we come from, how did we get to where we are today, and where are we going.
Minister, how long do you think the ANC will be able to use that ticket, the historical ticket? When is the ANC going to come with their achievements that are current, achievements that people can see here and now? And not to say that there are none at all. I'm just saying that to go back on the historical context when we're talking coalitions again, and that is the reality that we find ourselves in the talk of coalitions. And I know that is a topic that irritates you, speaking of irritation coming from the media, but coalitions are here to stay. How are you going to make sure that if you do not win, that you play nicely as well?
Well, one of the realities and the good thing about the African National Congress is that we always study a phenomenon, we always study a situation that we find ourselves in. We always learn lessons. It is this very African National Congress, through its government, that hosted a conference, if you recall, right here in Cape Town, where I happen to be, where we were talking about the phenomenon called coalitions, where we were doing an analysis of where have the so-called coalitions taken us. And you know, coalitions must also be understood in the context of the history of South Africa. Very unfortunate that we seem to be thinking that 30 years of democracy is something that should have changed the more than 300 years or 400 years or so of colonialism, of oppression, of exclusion, of black people being regarded as nothing but hewers of wood and drawers of water. And if we think as a nation we are going to be able to change that within a very short space of time, and please understand me very well, it doesn't mean we want to hang on to that history for the sake of hanging on to that history. That history that we all went through is the history that brought us to where we are today. But that history is a history that we are saying, as Nelson Mandela said, never and never again. We will continue to use that history. It will be a yardstick also that we need to use in order for us to show the difference between then and now, and also to show what we plan to do going forward. The history cannot be changed. I'm sorry about that. The history is history. It's the history that brought us here. And that history will slowly but surely be removed from our thinking from a point of view of being judged on the basis of what we have said we are going to deliver. But unfortunately for us, That history is that history, because if I were to look at myself and look at my own family and look at where my mother was, where my father was, where my grandfather was, and look at myself today, there is such a huge difference between then and now.
Right.
And I'm just making myself as an example.
Yes.
But you find that
we've run out of time, Minister. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off there. But thank you so much for joining us on Newzroom Afrika this evening. That was ANC NEC member and Minister Lindiwe Zulu.